Hello there, Ian here, and great to be with you once again. Now, if you've read the email subject line that informed you of this article and video, I do assure you that I've not gone crazy, and I do have an alternative to ditching the appraisals, because many of us have done these things for years and years. But there is some good practical research these days that say they are not nearly as effective as we may think they are. So I will give you some practical advice and tips on what we should do if we get rid of these appraisals. But first of all, follow me through and see how I've arrived at this quite dramatic subject line. First of all, let's go back and perhaps ask ourselves a question. Now, don't forget, I've been on both sides of the fence. I've been a team member who has been appraised by my supervisor or manager, and I've also been a manager that has conducted several appraisals for my team members. The question, just between you and me, is this: have you gone through that exercise on either side of the equation and thought to yourself, what's the point of doing this? Why are we sitting down doing this exercise? Are we just conducting this exercise to fill out the boxes because we're told to do it? It's part of the company policy and procedure, but we've never actually asked ourselves, is it working? Are these appraisals actually making a difference to our personal performance and the performance of the company? If you're like me, I've been sitting looking at my team player, trying to remember over the course of the last 12 months how that person has performed according to a series of metrics. I don't know about you, but I, on occasions, would really struggle to think how that person had done. I could probably remember a few of the elements that were particularly good or particularly bad, but the bulk of that person's contribution would largely get missed if I was only assessing him or her on an annual or at least semi-annual basis. On the flip side, as a team player being assessed or being appraised, I'd be trying to think of all the good stuff that I'd done throughout the year and trying to think back several months about how I'd contributed throughout that period. Also, there's frequently on appraisal forms an action plan section, meaning if the player that's being appraised is needing some input, some training or some development of some sort, what's the plan? Now, I have to hold my hands up that if I've been doing this on a semi-annual or annual basis, I'd look back at those action plans and really say, did we follow through with all the elements that we highlighted on that plan? Were they implemented, monitored, and did it make any difference in that person's performance and the performance of the team? I'm not sure about how you feel, but I know from experience that these things were often not followed through and really didn't make much difference that I could see. Now, let's turn to research. That's the experience, and I'm sure that maybe if you think back, you've had something similar in your own experiences. Today, there is good research, and by the way, I don't like quoting research without putting the source there, so if you look below the video window, you'll see in the article below that there are some links for you to do your own reading if you wish. So what that research tells us is this: that semi-annual or annual appraisals are not only not particularly productive, there's very little evidence that says that they influence individual or company performance. The research also says that they can be actually toxic to our environment and detrimental to our performance. What the evidence shows us is that even top performers, according to brain scans, that top performers can get anxious and defensive when they go into an appraisal situation, even though they've probably got nothing to fear from such an exercise. They're performing well, but even the top players get anxious and defensive. Performance appraisals can also be used for political gain and manoeuvring. I read about one particular manager that had used a performance appraisal to give a team member a particularly high appraisal score, so that team member would be promoted outside of that manager's team. So they can be used for political manoeuvring as well, which is especially damaging. So why do we do it? Well, there is a need for us at some way to recognise our top performers, our consistent contributors that may not be at the top end, and also those players that maybe are not a good fit for our team or our company. We need to know those sorts of metrics, because what the research also tells us is that the top 1% of our teammates account for 10% of our productivity and performance. So we need to know who those top players are and make sure we recognise them and give them a good reason to stay on our team. So we need some kind of a rating mechanism. But I hear you saying, but what? What do we do if we don't do those 6 monthly or 12 monthly appraisals? Well, don't you hate those consultants and trainers and coaches that in answer to a question give you an answer that goes something like this? Well, there's no right or wrong answer. It depends on your own circumstances. Well, doesn't that drive you nuts? Well, actually, in truth, there is no one right answer as to how to approach this, but I will give you a couple of tools that I think will be useful to you. And the first idea is taken, not surprisingly, from the world of sport. Now, if you're not a sports fan, then of course I appreciate that, but you will find the example appropriate, so follow me through. In sport, we typically get results on a far more frequent basis than we do in business. In sport, let's take football for an example, as an example. We get a result every week, win, lose or draw. And we can use those results to go into the next game. There was a documentary done on one of Britain's most successful football managers, a guy called Brian Clough, who, if you've never heard of him, that doesn't matter. But his wife in the documentary said that his most agonising decision was what team to pick on a Friday night before the game. He spent hours poring over who was in form, who was struggling, who was fit and healthy and who was injured, what the objectives of the game on Saturday were, who they were playing, what their strategy might look like, what the objectives of the season were, and put all those together and pick the best 11 players to start the game on a Saturday afternoon. And really that's what we've got to do in business. Let's use, instead of the team score on a Saturday afternoon, let's look at our projects that are ongoing throughout the course of our business. Most of our work in business today is project-based anyway. Let's use those projects as the touchstones for rating our players. At the end of a particular project, was it done to the right quality? Was it on time and on budget? Who performed well? Were the values maintained while we were doing the project? Who assisted in that project? And from there, how are our players performing? Who needs help? Who is a star? Who may be not a good fit? Who may be not a good fit for our team or these types of projects? So let's use those as a more frequent review of who's playing well in our team. The second clue is, surprise, surprise, your company's values. Now, I've mentioned values a lot before in the videos that precede this one, but the values are the foundation for how you do things in the company. And if you have a healthy set of values, and if you don't, by the way, and you're wondering how to really discover what your core values are, then please drop me a note. Get in touch and I can point you in the direction of some tools and resources that will really help you to get a good sense of your core values and how to live by them. So if you've got a good set of values, that's the next clue as to how to rate your players. The evidence is overwhelming that families, teams, and companies that adhere to a strong sense of the company's values do better than those that don't. It sounds like it's a soft, fuzzy skill. It's not. Adherence to a strong core set of values is not easy. It's actually quite hard to do. But when you've got a good set of values, when you can measure the adherence to those values and use them as another touchstone for evaluating your players, you can get a good sense of who your top performers, middle, and who may not be a good fit for you. You can rate people on that scale according to your values too. So I hope that those two ideas gave you a good sense of how to rate your players. Do we need to rate our players at all? Well, in my view, yes, we do. One of the reasons is that I mentioned before, we have to know who our top players are, but also we need to protect ourselves from possible litigation or HR tribunals if team members feel there's not a clear and transparent basis for who gets promotions, who gets bonuses, and who gets higher commissions, etc. We have to have a good basis for doing that so we don't create problems for ourselves down the road. My last idea on the subject of rating our players and helping our team members rise to the highest level of their performance is a word of caution. We want to be involved in the development of our players, but not too involved. If we look at semi-annual or annual and maybe even quarterly reviews, that may be too formal and too infrequent. In my view, we want to be involved on a more regular basis, but not too much. We don't want to be looking over the shoulders of our staff all the time and seeing how they're getting on. That too generates too much anxiety and stress. We want to be frequently involved on a regular basis, but not too much. What balance is right for you? Well, like any scientist would recommend you do, try some experiments and see if it works. Be open with your staff. Be open enough to say, we're trying this because I want you to get to the highest level of your potential. So I'm going to be looking at your projects, reviewing them with you and seeing what support and help that you need. And we'll use the results as our benchmark to help you progress. And try something. You'll soon know if the results back up what you've been doing. So I really hope that that made sense and gave you some ideas. Annual, semi-annual reviews, too much stress and anxiety, and not a lot of evidence that they really work. So let's move to something more engaging and let's look forward to some better results. Finally, if you'd like some more ideas on these and other topics, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. And also we've got our one-day scaling up workshop on the 23rd of May here in Kuala Lumpur, KL Central, the A-Loft Hotel. If you're around and you can make it for that, it'd be great to see you there. Registration details are somewhere on this page. And if not, then I look forward to sharing with you again very soon.